On this side of the show, we are taking a look at the very latest in politics. This is Political Point, and with me, just to reintroduce our guests, Embakasi North Member of Parliament James Gakuye, who's here with us in studio. Governance and policy expert Alex Manyasi is joining us via Zoom, while GEM MP Elisha Odhiambo is also joining us via Zoom. Now, the first issue that we shall be taking a look at is the political realignment as we head towards the 2022 elections. We are going to see more and more coalitions forming and alliances forming. But of course, there's a lot of politics surrounding it and a lot of fallouts that are being witnessed. And I'm just going to bounce off of a story that's being headlined, or rather being highlighted on page 5 of the Daily Nation. We're told Jubilee declares war on Ruto's UDA. Ruling party threatens to sever ties, saying it signed pre-election deal with PDR and not the rebranded UDA. And we did see an interview late last week where the deputy president ruled out any possibility of a coalition with ODM. So it's all about coalition, realignment, and people jostling for spaces that will be more favorable for them in the coming political, or rather election season. So I'll start with you, Honorable Gakuye. What do you make of this war on Ruto's UDA as the Daily Nation is putting it this morning?
First and foremost, let us agree that there has been a big division within the Jubilee party.
Yes.
And the division has not emanated yesterday. And the smoke started on a very small move, but now it seems to be a fire.
Yeah. And
if there is somebody who I can blame in terms of reuniting the party and putting the party together, one has to be the party leader and the secretary general of the party. Mm-hmm. Those two organs of the party must be the people entrusted by the party to make as the highest organ of the party to making the best decisions of the party and directing the party to the right directions. I would say that the divisions was a deliberate move, and this one I have nothing to hide about. Because if the head of state was willing to unite the two warring groups, actually with the stroke of the pen, he has been concluded this factor a long time ago. But actually it shows he had a deliberate move for the spirit of the magnitude it is today.
And, you know, while you might say that, one would argue also that for those who are not feeling accommodated in the party, they might as well have stepped out. What do you say of that argument, and do you foresee such an outcome in the near future?
One thing is that, in fact, we must agree in one way and on one thing, that the manner in which the Jubilee party was crafted, this is not the original party that took the president to the State House in his first term. Mm-hmm. In the second term, there was a sacrifice of almost 12 parties which were made obsolete so that they can clear a way for the Jubilee party. And therefore, I can say Jubilee was crafted from what we call stakeholders. And therefore, no single person can stand to say Jubilee belongs to him or Jubilee to him to the other person. I think there was a duty to respect the mutual agreement which was signed by those obsolete parties and those party leaders. And at any decision making, the roots and structures that were created by those stakeholders should be followed to the letter. But what we have been witnessing in Jubilee Party is the decisions are always made by two people, and no more than that. Then tells you that the rest of the organs or the rest of the stakeholders have been totally sidelined. And to me, even though there was a big hit, I cannot wake up to say I am just going to move out of the party, because one thing is that if you take an issue to do with the head of deputy president sacrificed his party, URP. And URP was made to be obsolete, and actually it exited just to make sure that there is a Jubilee party. And then when you tell me I am of no worth in this particular party, then my biggest question is, why can't you give back my share? Then I quit.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Mr. Manyasi, I'm curious as to your take on this one. The Jubilee Party has insisted it signed a pre-election pact with the Party for Development and Reforms, which branded to UDA, and now and therefore considered it a new entity. Jubilee declares a war on Ruto's UDA. Where do you sit on this one?
You know, once someone or a member of parliament or a leader for that matter is elected on a different party and then starts propagating the ideals of and the aspirations of a totally different party than the one that brought them to power, then that is where conflict comes in, and that's where you start seeing disciplinary measures being taken against members who then violate the law. That law was created to create discipline within political parties and to also bring order in the political space. But having mentioned that, if you think about the pre-election pacts and the fact that there are many parties that folded to form the Jubilee Party, that tells you, and I have insisted on this for many times, that the challenges that Jubilee is seeing today and the rift between the president and his deputy, there's a very high possibility that these differences were there in the first term. It's just that then at that time it was difficult. These two gentlemen needed to be re-elected. And so their differences could not have led to their split in public. And therefore, they stuck together to each other for purposes of being re-elected. But after re-election, if you think about even the strategy to put all the political parties to merge them or to technically kill them to form one party, my view is that the intention was actually to make sure that there are differences that probably had been foreseen and then do not degenerate. You can imagine if URP and TNA were different political parties. Chances are that the rift we'll be seeing in Jubilee will be worse than it is today. And so that was a very bright way that people stick together. And the differences as are today then ultimately just point to the fact that we have not seen the end of it, but propagating the ideas of a different party definitely then will be illegal.
And also, I'd like to know from you, what's your take on these agreements? I mean, it's even interesting that people are still talking about agreements, given that what we've seen with the president and the deputy president, they don't seem to last, particularly in Kenyan politics. So why even bother allude to a political agreement that was made before?
Yeah, so now the uniqueness of the agreement between the deputy president and the president is that they actually won the election. That is the uniqueness. And therefore, what it also means is that they shared power. And I'm sure we'll come to the issue of the Central Kenya MPs. So the president and the deputy shared power. For the other small parties, they were only supposed to, their benefits were supposed to be peripheral. If you look at KANU, for example, and others, then their benefits were supposed to be peripheral in the sense that they were not mainstream in terms of capturing power. But if you think about the president and the deputy, if you think about cabinet slots, government sharing, it was almost 50-50 in terms of running of government. But beyond that, remember that the president and the deputy are joined by the hip legally and constitutionally. And so the two of them are not separable. You can talk about many things, but you cannot remove the deputy president from office. And so the fact that he has a stake in government and the fact that he had a serious contribution in terms of how the government was formed, to date, the only thing that you can do, for example, is frustrate him through other avenues, but you cannot remove him from office. So the frustration, I'm sure, that the deputy president's camp has is the fact that the DP had a sizable chunk of government, probably half or even more, and the level of control. And I can speak about this for days in terms of the evidence that is there to show that the DP was actually in control of a lot of government machinery, and so that is where the disquiet is. And so, of course, the deputy president wanting to be president in 2022, he will have had the ideal being that he continues controlling the government machinery, which will then make it easier for him to capture power in 2022 much more easily.
Right. And Honorable Odhiambo, what is your take on this, the very latest Jubilee declaring war on Ruto's UDA? Mr. Manyasi has talked about the frustrations that the DP is facing. What say you about the latest? The ruling party has threatened to sever ties, saying it signed a pre-election deal with PDR and not the rebranded UDA.
I think what is important, it's good to note that this is like a marriage. If you have an MOU, it's like a marriage, you have a wife. Then in the process, both of you, the aspirations change. The logical thing to do is to go legally to a court of law and ask for divorce. And I think the DP and his Tanga team are chicken. I mean, these gentlemen, if they are serious, they should be serious like the Prime Minister. When he realized he can no longer work with Ford Kenya, what did he do? He left and formed the NDP and went for re-election. That is the brevity we need of politicians. I think as a president, I sympathize with the Honorable Muigai Kenyatta. You have a gentleman here who is working with you. All of a sudden, he realizes that he wants to vie for elections in 5 years and he starts campaign early. What do you do? I mean, they put president in a difficult scenario. So I think the president and his party are right to ensure that he has a legacy, to ensure that this country is left on a better platform. Because you have a deputy who is undermining your authority. I mean, it's never heard of. Then he suddenly walks away with a group of Tanga. You know, what can you conclude? You can only conclude that these people are looting with the deputy president. That's why they walked away with him. They're following him like hyenas. I mean,
Honorable Gakuya, yes.
Just put such kind of allegation in the national media. What has the Tanga members rooted? Just explain to the public. You can't just tell people like is that such a big allegation.
Honorable
Just
Diambo,
substantiate your allegation.
Please elaborate what you mean by looting from the deputy
Forwarded
president.
by people to root. How? Just
substantiate. Okay, let him do it.
I mean, you know Kimarora are all done. Who was mentioned?
How many members were in Kimarora?
You know Kimarora are all done. Who was mentioned? Was it the president? No, you know it. Gentlemen, Honorable Gakuya, be serious. And I stand by my words.
Okay.
Because this country is poor. We are in debt because of the people who looted the economy. The country is really in debt. We are taking it out. Why? Because of the Jubilee government.
Okay, I think we're veering off from the point, Honorable Odhiambo, and it is fair to ask you to substantiate some of those remarks. We cannot literally tie the economy to some members of parliament or indeed, the Tanga team. Honorable Gakuya, you seem to have a point that you'd like to drive home.
Tricks I can tell you. If somebody hates the deputy president in a passion, he must hate the deputy president on his own. But why do you label the rest of his followers as people following him to grab or to steal? How many members can you just label in that kind of allegation that they followed the deputy president for stealing? How many have been asked to record statements being part of that particular games of stealing? Just tell us. But you can, if you have an issue with deputy president, those who are personal issues. Okay. Why do you transfer your grudge to us?
Okay. Now, Mr. Manyasi, we've had the talk of them being cowardly for not walking out. What do you say about that?
You know, elections are very expensive.
Yes.
And you need to be extremely bold for you to actually walk out of your seat or negotiate yourself out of power. So members of parliament, even when they know that there is a law that prohibits them from propagating, like I said, the ideals of a different party, they will do that without obviously making it obvious that that is the direction they are taking. Because if you look at even the history of elections in Kenya, 60 to 70% of members of parliament are not re-elected. And so if you seek early re-election, then you have a 60 to 70 chance of not being re-elected. And so any bright politician will not want to walk that path. And so even when they know very well that they disagree with the party or the position they're in, they will not want a scenario where they're actually kicked out and seek re-election. Number two, it's not even healthy for a country. You can imagine if you were to kick out all the members of parliament who are allied to the deputy president, that will almost be an entire election. So as a country, do we even want that kind of scenario? Number two, can we afford it? Number three, you can imagine a scenario where half of parliament goes back to elections, and then 70% are not even re-elected. What kind of scenario is that? And that's why I am one of those people, for example, who faulted Maraga for saying that parliament should be dissolved. My imagination was, yes, you dissolve parliament. You create another scenario where we have a totally different election, and then in 2022 we have another election. And that's why even in the traffic and the curfew matters I was saying, you do not create a scenario where you create rules that are not enforceable. So right now, like I said, the best tactic is to go for those who are obviously very loud and obviously propagating the ideals of a different party, and de-whip them for that matter. But going for the entire brigade is going to be difficult to have. However, I can promise you, in 2022 by February, what you will see in the political arena is very different from what you're seeing today. That is when people will start speaking their hearts and minds. That's when people will start speaking anywhere and anyhow, knowing very well that even if you kick them out, then the election will be coming up anyway, and therefore it will make no difference. So right now we have not even seen anything yet, in my view.
Okay, Honorable Odhiambo, I'd like your take on that, and it is in line with what Mr. Manyasi has said. This is a quote from the Deputy President. He has said, UDA and Jubilee are one. We have a coalition agreement and we have been working together. If they break Jubilee trying to make it a tribal party, we will build UDA as the national party we had hoped Jubilee would be. So you have a point that you think it's cowardice for them to stick around, but clearly there is this sort of threat, not really a threat, but of course a promise that they would actually step aside and form UDA as a national party that they would have hoped to be. What do you think of that?
I think, I've said this before.
Yes.
I think the DP is looking for an alternative vehicle to exit. It just doesn't have the brevity to do that. And if you listen to the DP, the last week interview, isn't that at a difficult moment? I mean, the gentleman is been rained on. He has seen a lot of rain than we have seen as a country. But if I were him, I'd be brave enough and let the president tamper with his legacy. Let him build his legacy and build UDA separately from Jubilee, so that if he really wants to carve his own image, if he wants to carve an image of success, of somebody who can bring Kenyans together, then he needs to move away. As long as he stays in Jubilee, this country, the young Kenyans, they know very well that the loans we are paying for is a decision that was not just made by the president, it's a decision made by the Jubilee as a party.
About that,
so you cannot run away from it.
Honorable Gakuya, what do you say about that?
My position in this matter is that, one, the Deputy President is not at anyhow blocking the head of state to maneuver his agenda at any given point. At some point, we realized that the President changed his tax of working, and he elevated the Matiang'i to be the Chief Minister. And we never found the deputy president being overpressed by that particular decision. I can say that, in fact, the deputy president has no any single sign of putting any hindrance in preparing of Jubilee government. And the head of state hands are totally free to do whatever he wants to do. And he made a decision, very steep decision, of making sure that those people who were pro-Ruto were swept from the chairman positions in the Senate and chairmanship positions in the House. And we are still loyal to the Jubilee because there is no single bill in the House that we have boycotted to assigned to.
Indeed.
And this tells you there is no single point that the head of state or anybody can stand to say the followers of deputy president or the deputy president himself has obstructed the business of the Jubilee government.
Yes.
If the Jubilee government has their own problem, they should resolve their problem on their own way, economically or any other way, but they cannot keep finger pointing to the deputy president because even Kenyans public are very much aware that the deputy president is at the sideline. He has totally been sidelined and is not in the inner circle of operation, and he's really not obstacling anything for the Jubilee to propel its agenda. And therefore, if anybody thinks that by way of ditching the Jubilee is how to make the work easier, I would say it is not the way to go. And the deputy president at any single moment should not think on how to ascend out of the position of the deputy president. That's a position that was given to the Republic of Kenya. And therefore, I would say until which times comes to an end is when he should switch from that particular position. Nobody should pressure him. Yes, because he is at his own position. Nobody should tell us that he should buy the idea of the former prime minister to just cross. No, he is man of his own lot.
Okay.
So let us allow him to use his mind and decision. And at a point when he thinks that it's the best time for him to ditch the Jubilee, he will just ditch it.
All right, yes. He'll ditch it when he's good and ready. Now, Mr. Manyasi, there's another element of this quote from the DP that I'd like you to break down for us. He says, if they break Jubilee trying to make it a tribal party, in what way do you think the opponents of the Tanga group or the faction who have allegiance to the DP are trying to make Jubilee a tribal group according to this quote? How would you interpret that?
That can be interpreted in many ways.
Yeah.
But if you look at the statement that was shared by the members allied to the DP in Mount Kenya, I don't know if you have time, we will talk about that. It was unfortunate. So what the DP has been propagating across the country and for some time now, he was viewed, he has made it possible to be viewed as a person who was approaching from a nationalistic point of view. However, if you look at the statement that came from the Mount Kenya MPs allied to the DP, they have actually dragged us back to where the deputy president was trying to run away from. And that is making pronouncements that look like they are tribal, that look like they are regional, based on the demands that they are putting on the DP for purposes of their support for him. Why I say that is because when you demand for the position of deputy president, demand for the position of prime minister, demand for half of government, then the imagination will be, how then do you portray yourself as a nationalist and not regional or tribalist? That is the challenge that the DP is going to have to deal with, especially when he's dealing with the Mount Kenya region. But the aspect of saying that then Jubilee is being cocooned into becoming a tribal outfit, that could be true and false at the same time. True in the sense that depending on who is controlling or pulling the strings around the president. False in the sense that what I have given as an example is you can see one part of the DP supporters behaving in a manner likely to suggest that they are focusing, their interest in the new formation is actually not national, but regional and tribal at the same matter. So it's a bit difficult at this point. Some of us are waiting to see how the deputy handles the Mount Kenya region, because all signs indicate that things are now turning regional and tribal for that matter.
Of course, Honorable Diambo, I'd like your take on whether or not Kenyan politics can even exist without these tribal groupings, or perhaps marshalling support from various regions, and that would actually entail calling on board kingpins from certain regions. Where do you see the country going in terms of that, and where does ODM sit in this whole picture? Honorable Diambo, can you hear me?
Sorry, I can hear you.
Yes.
What is important is look at our heritage. We must look at our ethnic formations from a positive perspective.
Okay.
The synergies that those formations bring. And I want to remind ourselves of the synergy that Kibaki and Raila brought to the country. The excitement, the ecstasy, the economic empowerment, the economic growth that the country realized when the Luo and the Kikuyu ethnic communities work together. And now you can compare that with the Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta and Ruto. You compare the Rift Valley having a synergy with the Central. What happened? You know what happened. I don't have to talk about it. If you compare that Kibaki and Raila, at the time they worked together, you know what happened. You know the country realized a double-digit growth. So let us look at it from a perspective that our ethnic orientation is not exclusively negative. But if built on a better foundation, it could create a convergence of new ideas that can spur this country to an economic growth, which is good for Kenya. We cannot run away from the fact that we come from different regions, but we can use where we come from as a synergy to grow Kenya to greater frontiers. I've heard Alex what he has said of the meeting that took place right in Central. I think is very unfortunate that you are going to look for a synergy for purposes of individual benefits, for purposes of community benefits. I think when you get to the formation, you should look at it from a national perspective. How will the country benefit from a synergy of the Central Kenya and Rift Valley? How will the country benefit from a synergy of Western Kenya and Central Kenya? That for me is what we should look at. And I think this country has better, brilliant young men who will take over leadership position from us and make Kenya better. I am sure. I'm sure the country has better, and the country will see better days to come.
All right. Honorable Gakuya, what do you make of that? The meeting in Central and the opinion that we can actually marshal these tribal groupings, regions, to have things that are positive and that work for this country as opposed to divisions?
One trick, let me say that, in fact, we are operating from experiences. And politics, most of the time, you apply the experiences that actually we have come through.
Yes.
It is very true that, in fact, at any given alliance, there is no single alliance, and nobody can still sit here to mislead the Kenyans. Any single alliance is for the purposes of political interest. And what is political interest? Political interest, nobody can go to merge or to put an alliance with somebody, even though that somebody has what kind of magnitude of ideas. In politics, we look for what we call numbers. And therefore, you find the kingpins are based with what we call density communities. That's why you are finding somebody like Musalia Mudavadi is being labeled as a Western region. If it is to say to somebody today with the Bugoma senator,
Yes.
he's been labeled as a kingpin of that entire zone of Western region upper. And when we move to Eastern lower, then that's how Caroso is coming. And we have seen even the head of state trying to craft something which is somehow, even though you don't want us to call it tribal, but to me I call it somehow tribal.
Yeah.
Because at the time when he's bringing in the element of coast governance into his audience, and actually he's propagating this element of one Kenya with those pillars who represent certain communities. What is the narrative there? The narrative is to bring these communities together, combine them together with to form an alliance, which is a grand alliance, which will take through the 2022 election succession. And that's a game. Okay. And I don't see anything wrong with the other competitor, who is deputy president, to prepare and organize his crowd on the same route.
All right.
And when the Mount Kenya leadership is coming over, trying to, yes, because we are ready to join you, it is better when we are being asked by our community, what are your, what is our benefit in the route you are taking us? Then it is very important to come from point to be talking to the people of Mount Kenya region in a point of knowledge that yes, we have talked with the contender and we have agreed, yes, in terms of what we call robust economy in that particular region, he understands our narrative and our issues in what we call agricultural area. Because if we talk of Mount Kenya region, we are talking of agricultural area where there is milk, there is what we call tea farming, and there is what we call coffee farming, and so on. And I don't see anything wrong when the members are meeting with a contender they are willing to support, to ask or sit together to agree, yes, as long as you want our support, can you guarantee us that in your government you will consider 1, 2, 3? Can you do? And those, I believe, those are the issues to do with the memorandums. And the memorandum are not new. Yes.
Okay. Now, Mr. Manyasi, I'd like your take on that. You did term that meeting as unfortunate, but at the same time, there's a very good point that's being brought up by Honorable Gakuya of what's in this for us if we're going to take this direction. Because is it possible to even extricate political and regional interests from the national interests and national good?
I actually say that because of 2 reasons. Honorable Gakuya is right in all aspects to say that negotiations are always happening. However, there are 2 things that I want to highlight, which makes the meeting in itself was okay. However, what came out of the meeting was the most unfortunate because of 2 reasons. Reason number 1, the deputy president has been going around Kenya saying that tribal issues are not part of his agenda, that he's a nationalist, that he's going to have a bottom-up approach in terms of building the economy. The meeting in Mount Kenya exactly contradicted that. Number 1, it said they were talking about positions and sharing power, not just sharing power for government, but controlling government. In that sense, what they were saying, if you get a deputy president position under the current constitution, that is a position that you cannot remove. You're joined by the hip, like I said initially. Number 2, if you want the prime minister and deputy prime minister positions, and then also want half of government in terms of cabinet slots, then as a community, as one community, technically what you're saying is that you're taking up more than half of government. Now, what happens then? That's where my frustration and my problem is. So what happens to Kenya? So is this country then being turned into possibilities that it's about one community and another and not the other community in the country? So that's a problem I have. So the issue of sharing, in fact, just to say the least, it almost becomes unconstitutional in the sense that our constitution also talks about regional balance. Regional balance, to elaborate on that technically, in the Kenyan context, is tribes. So when we talk about Rift Valley, when you talk about Central, when you talk about Western, when you talk about Nyanza Coast, and then one community then says that they want more than half of the government, that in itself negates the very imagination that you can have regional balance, and therefore throws away the very ideals around where if you're looking for and hoping for an ideal society where it's more cohesive, then if that was to be granted, for example, what will stop anyone from saying that it has become a Kikuyu Kalenjin affair, such that it's rotational? You move from one community and go to the other, and then we finish from one community, go to the other. Currently, as we speak, the deputy president and the president shared power and technically shared positions almost in equal measures. And that and that's why I say it was in bad taste, in the sense that I wish they had not announced that kind of thing. I wish they had used it as a negotiating tool, but not tell everybody about wanting all those positions and therefore taking over more than half of government. It runs into a place where then other communities, if you can imagine, if the Luya was to say the same thing, the Luos are to say the same thing, the Kambas, then which government are we sharing ultimately? And so if it's about the two, and especially the people from Central, demanding that size of government, and then we should ultimately, if that kind of government is formed, you can imagine the disfranchisedness that the other communities will have. Right. So the positions are always there. However, they have to be realistic. They have to reflect on regional balance. And for the deputy president, and I said before, some of us are watching to see how he reacts to that, because that then will paint a different picture from what he has been painting.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Sure, I was a member of that particular team that met. And it's very important for me to speak from what is reality and what was reality in the meeting. I think what happened is that, in fact, when the matters move to what we call media, it reaches in a manner that it is more doctored than what originally was. And I can tell you, there was nothing like discussion of such sharing or position discussed there. And the meeting was purely issue to do with how to deal with the economic bloc within the Mount Kenya region. And that was the agenda. The agenda of sharing opposition was never came. But if there is anything, a narrative that is moving around in with that particular aspect that we gave terms and conditions of almost half government, that is misleading. It never occurred.
To take that as the closing remark on that particular aspect of this discussion. But let's take a look at, speaking of the media running off with a narrative, there was a lot of talk of a possible negotiations between Raila Odinga and William Ruto. And then late last week, we had the deputy president coming out to say there is no such thing that is ongoing. Honorable Odhiambo, was it ever a factor in your mind that there was a possibility of Kakamega Governor Wycliffe Oparanya going out to meet with the DP and trying to see whether they could work together in lieu of the upcoming election?
I think the Honorable Oparanya has clarified this publicly, and he has said it was a coincidence that they met at the Mara. It was not planned. It was a coincident meeting, but of course, when two politicians meet, it always captures the attention of the nation. I mean, from ODM perspective, the best match in this country, I mean, a match that you compare to Arsenal and Manchester, is between William Samoei Ruto and the Prime Minister, Raila Odinga. That will be an interesting political competition. This other formation for Musalia, the Siralak formation, Musalia, Kalonzo, and that team, I call them myself lazy politicians who are always appointed. I mean, that can't have a gravitas. You know, you only have gravitas when you talk about Raila Odinga and William Ruto at the ballot. It will capture the ecstasy of political mindsets in the country. And I think for us as ODM, we can't wait. We are waiting with a bated breath to tell Kenyans that, yes, you give this gentleman 10 years. What has happened to the economy? It's battered. Instead of him helping the president, he went on his different path. We are waiting for that moment. It is something I'm grudgingly waiting for. So, of course, there'll be many other formations as time goes by. I think there'll be even new young Kenyans coming up with their formations to put stake in their country, the country that they love.
Okay.
So for me, there'll be new formations. I can't rule out a formation between Raila Amolo Odinga, Muhoo Kenyatta, and Gideon Moi. I can't rule out that one. That could be a new formation.
Yes. Although he is not ruling such a kind of arrangement, he cannot brush the deputy president as the person who has made the economy to be shrinking in the 10 years. They came in the second ruling of the president, and I think the agenda for the handshakes is to assist the president to do whatever deputy president was doing and assist the president to do better. What is your take for these 5 years that you have totally sidelined the deputy and you are in charge?
The country is indebted. We are in debt because of you. Because of Jubilee. The country is rolling in debt. People are suffering. Kenyans are suffering. Kenyans are dying. I mean, if people have COVID now, if you go to the hospital, an ordinary Kenyan cannot be admitted until they pay 200,000. We must see better. You told us that our children are going to have iPads in your first term. What happened? They are in class 8. They have never seen iPad yet. You told us that each country will have a stadium. Do they have? Your own brother, Honorable William Samoei Ruto, said, I will go to Isiolo, put a stadium. I will go to Mombasa, put a stadium. I will go everywhere and put a stadium. Are they there? Please.
But tricks, two wrongs and make right. Two wrongs and make right. I think the ODM handshake came in to fix what was not able to be fixed by William Ruto. What is now denying them to fix?
Okay.
Those areas that were not fixed by the deputy president.
Okay, let's put a pin in that and let's take a look. I'd like to wind up on this note. There is talk of Interior CS Fred Matiang'i being used as a decoy, or as we run towards the election, as someone who would be used to create a runoff, and therefore he will be the Gema candidate. What do you say to that, on Mr. Manyasi, as we wind up?
Yeah, it's a bit too early to make a conclusion about the Honorable Matiang'i even running in the first instance. It's a bit early. However, what you will see is that in the months to come, if indeed, for example, the president will decide to run with someone who is not the deputy president of the Republic of Kenya today, then they will keep trying out different options and testing different waters. Then what will happen is that the Matiang'i name will keep coming up, the Musalia Mudavadi name will keep coming up, the Mohisa Kitui name will keep coming up, the Kalonzo Musyoka name will keep coming up, Gideon Moi's name will keep coming up. That way, in the sense that what then will happen is to look at what are the major possibilities of having one of these guys, for example, ascend to power. Now, if the run is going to be between the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, and the current Deputy President, and you have a third person whom then you're hoping to create a run of 4, there's usually no guarantee that a runoff then makes it possible for the third force to actually be the one that wins the election. It's more than that. That third force actually needs to be as competitive as the first two, assuming that the first two are the ones that are obviously going to run. So assuming that that also assumes that the former Prime Minister is going to ultimately run for president, because we know the Prime Minister is full of surprises. He has pulled fast ones before, and it will not be the last one. I mean, it will not be the first one if he actually does that. So if he does that, for example, the political arena in terms of the arithmetics completely change, and the aspect of bringing in someone else to play that role will almost completely diminish. So I think it's a bit early. If we have this discussion 4 months to the election, probably we'll be having a totally different discussion in terms of what we are likely to see.
Informed one. Thank you so much. Alex Manyasi is a governance and policy expert. Here in studio, I had Embakasi North Member of Parliament James Gakuya, and via Zoom is Elisha Odhiambo, Member of Parliament for GEM. Thank you so much for bringing context to some of these topics and the politics of the day. We are going to take a short break. Coming up is Your Money. We help you find ways or think up ways of saving money as far as fuel consumption is concerned. We do know that the prices went up this year yet again, and of course we shall be helping you save your coin.